Hello everyone. Hello both Riches, Tamsin, Jamie, Tinks, everyone, Dave, Moore, and everyone who's got on the old vlog wagon. Hello. I did do a vlog last night. I thought I'd talk about my dissertation because that's all I've been doing for the past, couple of weeks, whatever. But I realised the vlog was pretty boring as I kind of just read out my introduction. So I thought I'd do another one and sort of take it out of the kind of boring academic speech and sort of explain it in real people's language, which is, I think, probably better. So if you've got no interest in dissertations or in vampires and the contemporary representations of them or anything like that, then turn off, do something else, watch telly, bit of jezza, have a wank, anything. Or I can do this, and you can just replay this bit of the film. I don't know. It's going to take about 8 minutes probably, so just replay that like 50, 60 times. You'll be fine. Anyway, I'm reading my introduction while I'm talking, so excuse me if it gets a little bit odd. Basically, I've never really been a massive vampire fan. I just kind of think it's really interesting how sort of culturally suffused we are. How they're, Dracula's never been out of print. Obviously we've got all the Twilight and all that malarkey, and then massive film series like Buffy and True Blood, and there's one I can't remember the name of. He's like a vampire detective and all this. Not all of it particularly good in fairness, but it's all there anyway. So yeah, I kind of wanted to look at that and then kind of place the vampire in society and find out what they do and as a genre and such like. Anyway, I'll roughly go over my essay, my dissertation. So, first of all, I'm sort of looking at the Gothic as a genre, just to sort of just to set up my argument and kind of explain what the Gothic does, what influences the Gothic, and looking at myth as well. So looking at that, I'm looking at Sigmund Freud's set of essays, The Uncanny, which talk about that which is most scary is that which is at the same time familiar. He uses the words he uses are heimlich and unheimlich, which are German for homely and unhomely, but they have the same meaning. It's quite an interesting essay if you're into Freud and you kind of subscribe to his way of thinking, which I don't totally, but it's quite a good set of essays. Anyway, so I'm looking at that as the vampire is the kind of idea of the double, and it's at once familiar in that it's human, but essentially a human-looking creature. But then when you get to the bottom of it, it's not really, and that's where the actual fear comes in. Freud goes off on it a bit about castration fear, obviously. But I don't quite buy into that. Following on from that, I'm looking at a guy called Carl Jung, who's a myth theorist, who's really interesting actually. He's a student of Freud, and he moves away from Freud, but he's still he's sort of grounded in it, and he does some work on what myths do and how sort of mythic tales are actually sort of almost like I suppose a very easy way to put it would be like they're kind of self-help books in a way, but I know that's quite a sort of cheap way of saying it. But he talks about the process of individuation, which is kind of realizing who you are through myth, and you have you have a shadow of yourself, which in this I'm arguing is kind of vampire. So anyway, he's Carl Jung, really interesting to look up. Also looking at fertility myth. As a kind of the origins of the vampire myth, and the vampire being a sort of corrupted form of that. Fertility myth is all about a kind of a god who has to die and is then revived in order for sort of fertility to the land to be fertile. Osiris is a really good kind of example of this. So I'm looking at that and kind of the idea of if you don't die and someone else takes the place, it gets sort of the cycle is broken. Obviously a vampire doesn't die, it does die, but kind of transgresses death and life. So I'm looking at that as the kind of start of where it is. So that should, I'm quite happy with that. That's the first chapter anyway. Chapter 2, I do American studies as well, so I'm bringing the kind of the vampire as a sort of typically American bad guy. Now my argument for this is that it's, the American myth is based quite firmly in rural Europe. Obviously America, moved away from monarchical oppression, as they may like to talk about it. So it's sort of already there's the kind of the setting is already not what they want. But also that the Americans have a really sort of weird sort of dichotomous view of nature. That they love it and they want to be in touch with it, and they want it to survive and them to survive it and live off the land and all this stuff. But they're terrified of it. They're terrified of the forest, and the forest has always been the place where the devil lives, and the Native Americans bad because they're in touch with the land, and it's a really strange sort of mixture of good and bad. But anyway, they have a weird view of that, and obviously the vampire is always very tied to the earth, whether you look at it as having to sleep in the earth or sort of transforming into animals. Stakes being used to kill them, or wooden, and the sun, etc. Anyway, they're very tied into nature, so they already have that kind of something about them that the Americans don't like, or that's very cheap way of saying it. Also, obviously with the vampire, you inevitably get the idea of the vampire slayer. Now, the vampire slayer always inherits traits that are very typical of Americans, or what they would like to be anyway. He's often a kind of lone hunter, kind of lone gunman kind of character. If you think of all classic cowboys and frontiersmen, they're always the same sort of character. So bringing it into that kind of thing. However, they always have, again, the Americans have a kind of split idea about their heroes. They're never quite sure how heroic they are. They always cross the line between sort of good and bad, and doing what's needed and doing what's good and stuff. And also that's always found in the Slayer as well. So I'm going to sort of talk about that and bring it into American society, and also look at the influences that sort of popular culture has had, or American popular culture has had on the vampire. So obviously looking at kind of this huge youth culture that we're now in, sort of also some post 9/11 stuff. There's some really interesting trauma study stuff about huge traumatic events that trigger different bits of literature and fiction to bring out, and how they're affected by this. With 9/11, it's a lot of sort of siege sort of mentality films came out. So I'm going to look at that as well. That's quite that's quite important, I think. And what sort of place where the vampire fits into that. And then finally, looking at in the last chapter, looking at the vampire in contemporary culture, sort of right now, how it's changed. So films, they've often become heroes now. They sort of challenge what is good and what's bad. Obviously, we live in a society where there's no real kind of, there's not always the kind of definition. Although we'd like it to be as black and white, it's really not. But yeah, the vampire is always something other. They're always something outside of humanity, outside of society. But they're kind of being integrated. And that I think that represents society as a whole in general. A kind of fear of letting the outsider in, but it's happening. You have to kind of adjust it. Yeah. So looking at also the move away from religion as well. The vampire's gone from being a religious bad guy to a kind of just a something different out there. I mean, they're not repelled by crosses anymore. It's UV lights, and in True Blood they synthesize blood for them to drink, and etc. So anyway, yes, that's basically what I'm talking about. A kind of an idea at the beginning where they are at the beginning, what they do, and then where they are now. It's only 10,000 words, so it's not huge, but so if anyone's interested in what I'm doing or got any comments, leave me in this little doobly-doo bit at the bottom. PM me, email me, whatever. I love chatting about the stuff I'm writing. It always helps to sort of focus what I'm writing anyway. I've done a couple of essays on horror and gothic and stuff before as well, so if anyone wants to read some, I love reading my work and telling them it's good or shit or whatever. So yeah, so that's my vlog for today. That's what I'm doing. That's my life at the moment. I've only got about a week to finish it, so I'll be kind of pretty busy up until then. But I hope everyone's well, and I'll finish with a new one actually. better go because my spider sense is tingling.